If you think the scariest thing a man can say to his daughter is, "I'm disappointed in you," try hearing this instead. "You've got 5 minutes to sign over your company, or I make one call and have you committed." Yeah. That's how my father opened dinner. No hello, no congratulations on the 580 million valuation. Just a threat served neat, like the 3,000 Bordocks he was pretending he could still afford. He thought he had a gun to my head. What he didn't know, I owned the bullets. 4 hours earlier, I was standing in my corner office in downtown Boston, staring at the ticker running across the financial news screen. Grain Hospitality Group. Valuation, 580,000. 5 years, 5 brutal ramen noodle, hand scrubbing, floor sanding years. From sleeping on a mattress that smelled like mildew, to building a hotel empire brick by brick. I should have been celebrating. Instead, my phone Bashford. Not Dad, just Edward. The message was short: family dinner, 7 p.m., urgent, don't be late. No warmth, no pride, just a command. Like I was still the 24-year-old girl he kicked out for marrying, beneath the family. My stomach tightened. Not from fear. From memory. 5 years ago, he locked the iron gates of the estate behind me. Told me if I married Julian, a penniless draftsman, I was dead to the Ashford legacy. He cut off my trust fund, my business contacts, my credit lines, even my health insurance. He thought we'd starve and come crawling back. Instead, we got hungry, and hunger is one hell of a motivator. Julian and I lived in a 400-square-foot studio that smelled like damp drywall and broken dreams. We renovated our first boutique hotel ourselves. I learned plumbing from YouTube. He drafted floor plans at 2 a.m. while I balanced spreadsheets on an overturned paint bucket. We ate instant noodles for 2 years. And every night I swore one thing: if I ever got power, I would never abuse it the way he did. Back in my office, I almost ignored the dinner invite. Almost. But then I opened the encrypted app my little brother Lucas used to send me intel from inside the mansion. 2 days earlier, he'd sent a photo, a crumpled document pulled from Edward's trash. Final notice of default. The 28 million, high-interest bridge loan, personally guaranteed, due in 48 hours. My father wasn't calling me to reconcile. He was calling because he was drowning, and he thought I was his life raft. I smiled, because he had no idea I was already holding the anchor. I didn't call my husband. Didn't call my therapist. I called my lead counsel. "Buy the debt," I said. Silence. Then, "Are you sure? Every cent of it. Pay whatever premium they want. I want that note in my name before 6 p.m. There's something poetic about buying your father's debt before sitting down to dinner. When I stepped into the elevator, I checked my reflection in the chrome doors. The scared girl. Gone. Tonight, I wasn't visiting my father. I was meeting my debtor. The Ashford dining room always felt like a mausoleum with better lighting. My mother sat stiffly to my right, twisting her napkin like she was wringing out a confession. Lucas avoided eye contact. Edward sat at the head of the table like he still ruled an empire. He poured his wine, and for just a second, just a flicker, his hand trembled. Bingo. He sliced his steak like it personally offended him. "I saw the news," he said. "Beginner's luck is a dangerous drug. Makes amateur girls think they're real businesswomen. Cute. And how's the draftsman?" he added with a smirk. "Still coloring while you do the heavy lifting. 5 years ago, that would have crushed me. Tonight, I just watched him sweat, because men who threaten usually do it when they're out of options. And he was running on fumes." He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. It stopped inches from my plate. I opened it. Emergency petition for conservatorship. 3 psychiatric evaluations claiming I was unstable, paranoid, unfit to manage finances, all signed. All ready to file. The name on top stopped me cold. Dr. Ares Vance, a psychiatrist I hadn't seen since I was 12. "He'd lose his license for this," I said evenly. Edward smiled. Thin and poisonous. "He's more worried about the 200,000 in gambling debt I covered in Atlantic City." My stomach didn't drop. It hardened. He wasn't just desperate. He was corrupt. "You sign over control voluntarily," he said softly, "or this gets filed in the morning. Your stock tanks. Investors panic. I take over to protect you." He leaned back like he'd already won. "Your choice." I looked at the papers. Then at him. And for a split second, I saw it. Not power. Not control. Fear. He needed me to break. That was the only way this worked. So I asked him one thing. Why? He blinked. Not the company. Not the money. Why did you try to ruin Julian? He laughed. Actually laughed. I didn't ruin him. I simply made a few calls. Boston's small for people with my influence. My chest went tight. I told the top firms that if they hired your husband, I'd pull our construction financing. He took a sip of wine. I checked your credit reports sometimes. Just to see how close you were to crawling back. He smiled. I wasn't being cruel. I was being a father. That was the moment something inside me permanently shut off. He didn't just watch us struggle. He engineered it. Every skipped meal. Every rejection letter. Every night I cried over unpaid bills. He called it parenting. I called it war. I slid the envelope back toward him. You love leverage, Dad, I said quietly. Let's talk about yours. His smile flickered. You sign those papers or Vance files tomorrow. I reached under my chair, pulled out a heavy legal binder, and slammed it onto the table. The crystal rattled. 4 hours earlier, my attorneys finalized the purchase of Cerberus Capital's shell company. The one holding his $28 million bridge loan. I bought your debt, I said. Silence fell like a guillotine. I own the note. I own the default clause. His face drained of color. That's confidential. It was, I said, until they sold it. I leaned forward. I'm calling the loan. Full repayment. Due immediately. And just like that, the king realized he was naked. He shot to his feet so fast the chair crashed backward. This is fraud. Lucas stood up. My mother gasped. I didn't move. Because when you hold the paperwork, you don't need to yell. I electronically filed the confession of judgment 10 seconds ago. I said calmly. Public record. He froze. You can't. I already did. And for the first time in my entire life, Edward Ashford looked small. He thought he was about to lock me away. Instead, he walked into his own foreclosure. And we were just getting started. You ever watch a man realize, in real time, that the game he rigged just flipped on him? It's not loud at first. It's subtle. A twitch in the jaw, a pulse jumping in his temple. The exact second he understands he's not the hunter anymore, he's the asset. That was the moment my father stopped being Edward Ashford, titan of finance, and started being a $28 million liability, sitting at the head of a very expensive table. This is fraud! He roared again, louder this time, like volume could reverse paperwork already filed with the state of Massachusetts. Spit hit the table, his perfect silver hair was out of place. And I swear to God, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because 5 years earlier, when Julian and I were choosing between paying rent or buying groceries, Edward wasn't screaming. He was sipping wine and checking our credit score like it was a bedtime story. Now the tables were flipped. And he hated the view. Lucas moved first. Dad, just sit down, he said, but there was something different in his voice tonight. Not fear. Distance. Edward lunged toward the binder again like ripping it would erase the legal system. I didn't flinch. You can tear that copy up, I said coolly. My legal team already executed the seizure notice. He froze mid-grab. What seizure? There it was. The crack. I straightened in my chair. You pledged 51% of your voting shares as collateral. Upon default, secured creditors have immediate rights to voting control. Silence. Then, softer. It landed. Hard. His phone started buzzing, then buzzing again, then again. Board members, general counsel, the CFO. You know what's louder than yelling? Notifications. Each vibration was another brick being removed from the castle he built on ego and leverage. He checked the screen, his face drained from red to gray. No, he whispered. That word sounded different from him. Smaller. You don't get to say no, I replied. You signed the contract. He opened his mouth like he was about to argue legal technicalities. The same way he used to debate me at 16 about curfews and family reputation. But this wasn't a family argument. This was corporate execution. My mother finally spoke. Edward, what did you do? Her voice wasn't accusing. It was tired, like she'd been asking that question for 30 years. He rounded on her. Stay out of this. Classic. When men lose power, they look for someone smaller to dominate. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. No, I said, she stays. Because here's the thing about tyrants, they rule through isolation. Tonight, the lights were on, and everyone could see him clearly. I walked around the table and stopped in front of him. Up close, he didn't look intimidating. He looked old. Fear does that. You have 30 days, I said evenly. 30 days to vacate the CEO office. Security access is revoked at midnight. His chest rose and fell rapidly. I built that company. And then you leveraged it to cover your bad bets. I replied. His voice cracked. You wouldn't dare prosecute your own father. There it was. The blood card. Family. As if he hadn't weaponized that word my entire life. You tried to have me institutionalized, I said quietly. You forged psychiatric reports. My eyes locked on his. Don't test what I would dare. Lucas stepped closer to me now. Subtle, but clear. A line had been crossed. And he knew which side he stood on. Edward noticed. Of course he did. Lucas, he snapped. Tell her she's making a mistake. Lucas didn't move. Didn't blink. You told me business is business. He said calmly. Guess she learned from the best. And that might have hurt him more than the debt, because control over his son was slipping too. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner. Every second louder than the last. Edward ran a hand through his hair. You're bluffing, he said finally, desperate. The board won't support this. I smiled. Check your email. He did, and the look on his face when he saw the unanimous emergency resolution. Priceless. Board approval for interim leadership transition. Effective immediately. Signed. Filed. Stamped. He wasn't king anymore. He was unemployed. You planned this? He breathed. No, I corrected. You forced this. Let's get something straight. I didn't wake up wanting to crush my father. I wanted freedom. He chose war. He tried to cage me. He tried to erase me. He tried to prove I was nothing without him. So I did what he taught me. I secured leverage. And I pulled it. My mother stood slowly. Is it over? She asked. For tonight, I said. She looked at Edward, and for the first time in my life, she didn't rush to comfort him. She didn't smooth his rage. She didn't apologize for him. She just looked tired, like she finally saw the cost of standing beside a man who mistook dominance for love. I'm going upstairs, she said softly, and she walked away. Not dramatically, not angrily, just done. That silence hit him harder than my lawsuit. Edward turned back to me. You think this makes you powerful, he hissed. You think money makes you untouchable. No, I said. It makes me independent. And independence. That's the one thing he could never buy. I picked up my purse. This was the part where old me would have shaken. Where guilt would have crawled up my spine. Where I'd question if I'd gone too far. But here's the truth nobody tells you. When you've been emotionally held hostage long enough, freedom doesn't feel cruel. It feels clean. I walked toward the door. Behind me, his voice cracked in raw. You ungrateful witch! I made you? I didn't turn around. Because that line, that's what insecure men say when they realize you made yourself. Outside, the air hit different. Cold, sharp, alive. For 5 years, I thought beating him meant proving I could survive without him. I didn't realize something until that night. Survival wasn't the victory. Choice was. He no longer controlled my income, my housing, my health, my reputation, or my narrative. He tried to weaponize my mind against me, and instead, I took his company. When I got into the car, my phone buzzed again. Text from my lead counsel. Transfer complete. Board meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. You're officially in control. I leaned back against the leather seat. For a split second, I felt 12 years old again. Sitting outside his office, waiting for permission to speak. Except now, I didn't need permission. I had authority. But here's where it gets interesting. Because taking control of the company, that was step one. What Edward didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that his financial mess ran deeper than that bridge loan. Way deeper. And once my audit team started digging, we found something that didn't just threaten his ego. It threatened prison time. And that changed everything, because power is one thing, but justice is personal, and what we uncovered in the next 72 hours. Let's just say, He should have been more worried about federal prosecutors than about me. If you think losing your company is rock bottom, try realizing the paper trail you left behind could land you in federal prison. That's where my father's story really started to unravel. Because calling his loan, that was chess. The audit, that was checkmate. The next morning, I walked into Ashford Financial's headquarters for the first time not as Edward's daughter, but as CEO. The brass nameplate outside the executive suite still read Edward J. Ashford. Chief Executive Officer. By noon, it wouldn't. I stood there for a second, staring at it. 5 years ago, I begged to sit in those meetings. Now, security scanned my new access badge and opened the door without hesitation. Funny how authority changes posture. The staff inside looked stunned, some nervous, some curious, a few relieved. Because here's what most people don't understand. Tyrants don't just terrorize their families, they terrorize their employees too. At 8 a.m. sharp, the emergency board meeting began. 12 directors, half of them men who'd known me since I wore braces. Now they had to vote on me. The interim leadership resolution had already passed electronically the night before, but this was formal, public, permanent. I didn't oversell myself, didn't overtalk. I laid out the facts: a bridge loan default, the share seizure, the governance transfer, the immediate stabilization plan. Then I added one more slide: forensic audit initiative. That's when the room shifted. One board member cleared his throat. Is that necessary? I looked him dead in the eye. If there's nothing to hide, it's painless. Silence. Vote passed unanimously. And just like that, the books were opened. Now let me explain something. When powerful men panic, they make sloppy moves. Edward had been juggling liquidity gaps for months. The $28 million loan wasn't an investment play, it was a cover-up. Within 24 hours, my audit team flagged something weird: offshore transfers, shell entities, consulting fees paid to firms that didn't exist. At first glance, it looked like aggressive accounting. By hour 36, it looked like embezzlement. My CFO, who suddenly found religion when I took over, brought me a folder. You need to see this. I flipped through wire transfers totaling nearly $9.4 million over 2 years. Destination accounts, Cayman Islands. Beneficiary names, hidden behind layered LLCs. Classic, sloppy, desperate. I leaned back in my chair. Here's the thing, I could have buried it, quietly forced him into retirement, let him disappear with dignity. But then I remembered something. Every unpaid bill Julian and I struggled through, every rejection letter engineered by my father's threats, every humiliating credit denial. He didn't just try to control me, he tried to erase me. So no, I wasn't burying this. I called my lead counsel. We're escalating, I said. To regulators and federal authorities. There was a pause. This will be public, I know, and it will destroy him. He did that himself. By hour 48, subpoenas were being drafted. By hour 72, Edward's attorney was calling nonstop. He showed up at headquarters unannounced. Security denied him entry. The look on his face in the lobby, caught on security footage, was surreal, confused, angry, humiliated. He demanded to see me. I allowed it. Supervised. Conference room only, no executive access. The power dynamic. Chef's kiss. He walked in looking like he hadn't slept. You're making a mistake, he said immediately. No, I replied calmly. You made several. He slammed a folder onto the table. I can settle this internally. With offshore laundering. His jaw clenched. It's liquidity management. It's fraud. We stared at each other. For once, there were no theatrics. Just truth. You don't understand how this works, he snapped. Oh, I do, I said softly. You move money when you're cornered. You hide losses. You gamble with leverage. He went still. You've always thought fear was strategy. And you think revenge is leadership. No, I corrected. Accountability is. He tried one last angle. Think about your mother. There it was again. Family is shield. She'll be fine, I said. She'll finally have peace. You're destroying your own blood. You tried to institutionalize me. Silence. He looked older than ever, and for just a split second, I saw something real. Regret. Not for what he did. For getting caught. 3 weeks later, federal investigators formally opened a case. News outlets picked it up fast. Financial giant under investigation after leadership shakeup. Speculation exploded. Stock volatility spiked. But here's the twist nobody expected: Grain Hospitality Group's valuation went up. Because markets love one thing more than power. They love transparency. I held a press conference. Clear, controlled, confident. We are committed to ethical restructuring and long-term stability. No drama. No family talk. Just governance. That's how you win Wall Street. At home that night, Julian and I sat on the balcony again. City lights blinking below us. "You okay?" he asked. I thought about it. "Yes," I said honestly. Because here's the wild part: I didn't feel vindictive. I felt resolved, like I'd finally closed a door that had been rattling in my head since childhood. "You never wanted to destroy him," Julian said quietly. "No." I agreed. "I just refused to let him destroy me." He squeezed my hand. "That's strength." But strength doesn't erase consequence. The formal charges came 2 months later: wire fraud, misappropriation of corporate funds, false financial disclosures. Edward Ashford was officially under federal indictment. The headlines were brutal. His mugshot, even worse. "Power looks pathetic under fluorescent lights." My mother called me the night the news broke. Her voice wasn't angry. It was fragile. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I believe you," I said. And I did, because enabling isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's survival. "I'm filing for divorce," she added. That one surprised me. "Are you sure?" "I should have left years ago." Sometimes revolutions ripple farther than you expect. Lucas moved out shortly after. Took a job in Chicago. Fresh start, clean slate. "Guess the empire's really over," he joked. "Good," I said. "Empires are overrated." He laughed. "You really flipped the whole board." "No," I replied. I just stopped playing his game. Here's the truth nobody tells daughters of powerful men: you spend your whole life thinking you need their approval to exist. Then one day, you realize you were the leverage all along. Edward built his legacy on intimidation. I built mine on resilience. He believed control created loyalty. I proved freedom creates growth. 3 months later, renovations began on the old Ashford headquarters. We rebranded it, rebuilt it, reimagined it, and when the new sign went up, it didn't carry his name, it carried mine. Not because I needed revenge, but because I earned it. But here's the twist. Just when I thought the storm was over, a sealed envelope arrived at my penthouse. No return address. Inside, a copy of Dr. Vance's psychiatric report, and a handwritten note in the margin: "You were never unstable. He paid me to lie." Signed, Aries Vance. That letter, that changed everything again. Because now, this wasn't just financial. This was criminal conspiracy. And I wasn't done. The envelope was thick. Heavier than it should have been. That's how you know it's carrying something ugly. I was standing barefoot in my kitchen when the concierge called up to say a courier dropped it off. No return address. No company label. Just my name written in shaky ink. Julian looked at me from across the island. "You expecting something?" "No," I said. But my chest already felt tight. Because when you grow up around manipulation, you develop a sixth sense for incoming chaos. I opened it. And there it was. Dr. Aries Vance's psychiatric evaluation, the same forged breakdown report my father tried to use to steal my company. Except this copy wasn't clean. It was marked up in red pen. Notes in the margins. Corrections. Cross-outs. And at the bottom of the last page, written by hand: "You were never unstable. He paid me to lie. I can't carry this anymore." Signed, Aries Vance. For a second, the room felt like it tilted. Not because I was shocked. Because I wasn't. Deep down I always knew those reports were fake. But seeing the confession, that hit different. Julian walked over slowly. "Is that?" "Yeah." He read it. His jaw tightened. "He tried to have you locked up." "Not tried," I said quietly. "He was seconds away." Let that sink in. My own father was ready to strip me of my legal autonomy, my company, my credibility, my freedom, all because he couldn't control me. And now, the man he bribed had a conscience attack. I sat down. Not weak, not shaken, just processing. Because this wasn't just corporate fraud anymore. This was criminal conspiracy to falsify medical records and attempt unlawful institutionalization. That's prison time. Serious prison time. Julian crouched in front of me. What do you want to do? I didn't answer right away. Because here's the thing about revenge. It feels powerful in the moment. But justice requires precision. And I don't move sloppy. By 9 a.m. the next morning, my legal team was in the conference room. The letter projected on the screen. Silence thick as concrete. My lead counsel spoke first. If this is authenticated, it strengthens the federal case exponentially. I want it authenticated, I said. And Vance? He'll cooperate, I replied. Guilt like this doesn't show up unless someone's ready to talk. We tracked him down by noon. License suspended. Practice shuttered. Reputation in ruins. Funny how karma doesn't need a GPS. When we met, he looked worse than my father did at the loan seizure. Smaller. Hollowed out. He didn't even try to defend himself. I thought it was just a scare tactic. He muttered. I didn't think he'd actually file it. You signed it, I said calmly. He nodded. He paid off my debts. Threatened to expose me if I refused. Classic Edward. Leverage through shame. How much? I asked. $200,000. $200,000. That's what he valued my sanity at. That's what he thought my autonomy was worth. Vance agreed to provide sworn testimony. Recorded. Signed. Delivered to federal investigators. And just like that, the case against Edward shifted from financial misconduct to malicious intent, attempted coercion, fraudulent medical conspiracy. It wasn't just business anymore, it was personal criminality. The media caught wind fast. Headlines exploded. Former CEO accused of conspiring to institutionalize daughter. Talk about poetic collapse. Because you can survive financial scandal in corporate America, but family betrayal, that sticks. Sponsors distanced. Old allies went silent. Even the country club revoked his membership. Power evaporates fast when the illusion cracks. My mother called again. This time she was crying. I didn't know he went that far, she said. I know, I replied. And I did, because manipulation doesn't just trap one person. It traps the whole house. He said you were unstable, she whispered. I thought maybe you were overwhelmed. There it was. Gaslighting doesn't just target the victim. It infects the witnesses. I was overwhelmed. I said gently, be him? Silence. Then a quiet sob. I'm sorry. That one mattered. Not because I needed it, but because accountability is contagious. Edward's attorney requested a meeting. This time, not arrogant. Not aggressive. Controlled damage mode. They wanted settlement discussions. Reduced charges in exchange for restitution. I considered it. Really. Because dragging someone through federal court is brutal. But then I remembered the envelope, the forged diagnosis, the threat of losing my freedom, and I realized something. If I let this slide quietly, I'd be complicit in my own erasure. So I declined. The indictment expanded. New charges added. Vance formally testified. Paper trails confirmed payment transfers tied directly to Edward's offshore accounts. You know what breaks powerful men faster than public shame? Documentation. There's no arguing with timestamps. The trial date was set. 6 months out, plenty of time for speculation, for gossip, for people to whisper, she destroyed her father. No. Let's get this straight. I exposed him. He destroyed himself. One night, weeks before the trial, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered. Silence at first. Then his voice, rough, thinner. You win, Edward said. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sarcasm. It was defeat. This isn't about winning, I replied. It always was for you? He said. No, I said calmly. For you, it was about control. Silence. Then, you were always my strongest asset. There it was, not daughter, asset. Even now. Even after everything. I almost laughed. You should have treated me like a person then. He hung up. And that was the last time we ever spoke. The trial was swift. Evidence overwhelming. Vance's testimony devastating. Edward Ashford was convicted on multiple counts. Sentenced. No dramatic courtroom breakdown. No final speech. Just a quiet fall. Because most empires don't explode. They rot from the inside until they collapse. After sentencing, reporters swarmed me outside the courthouse. Do you feel vindicated? Do you regret pursuing charges? Will you visit him? I answered once. Calm, measured. This was never about revenge. It was about boundaries. And I meant that. Because here's what nobody prepares you for: when you break generational control, freedom feels unfamiliar at first, like stepping into sunlight after living underground. You squint, you adjust, but eventually, you realize you were never meant to live in the dark. That night, Julian and I didn't celebrate. We ordered takeout, sat on the balcony, watched the skyline, quiet, peaceful. "You okay?" he asked. I thought about it. "My last tie to fear just broke," I said. He nodded. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's daughter fighting for approval. I was just me. Whole, autonomous, unapologetic. But here's the twist. Just when everything finally settled, a letter arrived from the prison system. Not from Edward. From someone else. And what it contained. Let's just say, the past wasn't finished with me yet. The return address said Federal Correctional Institution. My stomach didn't drop, it went still. You know that feeling? When your body doesn't panic, it just braces. Yeah, that. I stood in the foyer of my penthouse, envelope in hand, staring at the stamped barcode like it might blink first. Julian walked over slowly. From him. No. I flipped it over. Different inmate number. Different name. Female. That caught my attention. Because my father didn't have many women in his orbit. He didn't see them as equals. He saw them as leverage. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Neat, controlled, no drama. My name is Evelyn Cross. I was your father's executive assistant for 9 years. I am currently serving time because I signed documents he told me were legal. There's something you need to know. I read it twice. Then a third time. Julian watched my face carefully. What? He didn't act alone. Evelyn Cross. I remembered her. Late 30s. Always composed. Efficient. Invisible in the way powerful men like their assistants essential but overlooked. I'd seen her dozens of times growing up. She used to slip me candy when my father kept me waiting outside his office. And now she was in prison, because she signed something he handed her. Classic Edward. Keep your hands clean. Let someone loyal carry the weight. The letter continued. The offshore transfers weren't just about liquidity. He was moving money long before the bridge loan. He was preparing for something. My pulse ticked up. Preparing for what? He believed you would fail. He built contingency structures to absorb your assets if you collapsed. I blinked. What does that mean? Julian asked quietly. It means, I said slowly, had a plan for when my company went under. Julian frowned. But you didn't. Exactly. The letter included account numbers. Trust formations. Shell corporations linked to hospitality investments. My hospitality investments. I felt the air shift. He wasn't just trying to take Ashford Financial. I murmured. He was circling my company too. Julian's expression hardened. How? I flipped to the last page. And there it was. A draft acquisition structure dated 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Back when Julian and I were barely surviving. Back when we were renovating our second boutique hotel with borrowed tools and maxed-out credit cards. Edward had quietly established a holding entity designed to acquire distressed hospitality assets in New England. Distressed assets like mine would have been, if we'd failed. He was waiting for us to break. I whispered. Julian's jaw tightened. He wanted to buy you out cheap. No. I corrected. He wanted to own what we built. Let that sink in. While we were eating instant noodles and praying rent cleared, he was structuring a takeover. Just in case. That's not business strategy. That's predatory patience. I finished the letter. The last line stopped me cold. He never believed you would win. That's why he never dismantled the structure. It's still active. Still active. Meaning there was still a shell entity floating out there. Legally positioned to strike if certain triggers hit. Triggers like stock volatility, regulatory pressure, or leadership instability, which we'd just gone through publicly. My mind started connecting dots fast. The audit, the press, the trial. If someone wanted to exploit temporary weakness, now would be the time. I called my legal team immediately. Emergency review. Full trace. By midnight we confirmed it. The holding company existed. Dormant but intact. Capitalized through layered funds we hadn't traced during the initial audit. And here's the kicker. Edward wasn't the only signatory. There was a secondary executive authority listed. Active. Undisclosed. My chest went cold. Ooh, I asked. Silence on the other end. Then my attorney said a name that made my blood turn to ice. Martin Hale. Board member. Longtime ally of my father. And currently, still sitting on my board. You ever feel the ground shift under you without moving? That's what that felt like. Because betrayal hits different when it's fresh. I'd just cleaned house, rebuilt governance, stabilized the company. And somehow, a snake was still coiled at the table. Julian stepped closer. What are you thinking? I'm thinking my father doesn't play small. Martin Hale had voted unanimously to install me as CEO. Smiled at press conferences. Publicly supported the audit. Meanwhile, he was authorized on a dormant acquisition vehicle designed to swallow my company whole if I stumbled. That's not loyalty, that's long-game infiltration. By 2 a.m. I had full documentation, emails recovered, archived memos, a contingency memo labeled Succession Stabilization Plan. Translation: if the daughter collapses, we step in. It was signed by Edward and Martin. Dated the same week my first hotel nearly defaulted 5 years ago. He didn't just sabotage us externally. He planned to collect the pieces internally. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. From calculation. Because here's what men like that count on: emotion. Overreaction. Public explosion. I don't explode. I execute. The next morning, I called an unscheduled board meeting. No agenda sent, no warning. Martin walked in relaxed, confident, smiling. How can we help today? He asked smoothly. I placed the printed acquisition documents in front of him. His smile didn't vanish immediately. But it thinned. I'd like you to explain this, I said calmly. He adjusted his glasses. It's an inactive contingency vehicle. For what? Risk management. For my failure. Silence. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Because now they knew. This wasn't hypothetical. This was predatory architecture. You intended to activate this during stock instability. I continued. No. He replied quickly. It was precautionary. Signed 3 years ago. He didn't answer. Because there wasn't a good one. You're in breach of fiduciary duty, I said evenly. That landed. Harder than shouting ever could. You can't prove intent. He tried. I slid an email across the table, printed, highlighted, from him to Edward. If she collapses under pressure, we absorb at 40% valuation and restructure quietly. The room went dead silent. There's a specific kind of humiliation that powerful men experience when their private calculations are dragged into fluorescent light. Martin went pale. You had no confidence in my leadership, I said. You had no loyalty to governance. And you positioned yourself to profit from sabotage. He stood abruptly. This is an ambush. No, I replied calmly. This is exposure, vote initiated, emergency removal, conflict of interest, breach of trust. Unanimous. Security escorted him out within the hour. No shouting, no drama, just quiet dismantling. Because power handled cleanly, cuts deeper. When the doors closed behind him, one board member leaned back and exhaled. Your father really built a web. Yes, I said softly. And I just finished tearing it down. That night, I wrote back to Evelyn Cross. Thanked her. Arranged legal support for sentence review based on coercion evidence. Because here's the difference between me and Edward. I don't use people as shields. If someone pays for my war, I make it right. Julian and I stood on the balcony again later. City lights blinking steady. You okay? He asked. I nodded. He underestimated something. What? That I'd learn. From him. From hardship. From leverage. From betrayal. He built traps assuming I'd stay non-V. Instead, he trained his replacement. But here's the part nobody saw coming. 2 weeks after Martin's removal, a private equity firm reached out. Massive. Global. Interested in acquiring a minority stake in Grain Hospitality at triple our original valuation. And guess who was advising them? A consultant with the last name Ashford. Not Edward. Not Martin. Someone else. Family. And this time, it wasn't my father. When I saw the name on the advisory disclosure, I didn't panic. I didn't flinch. I didn't even curse. I just leaned back in my chair and stared at it. Consulting advisor Charlotte Ashford. My cousin. Edward's niece. The one who left the family quietly 10 years ago after a disagreement. The one nobody talked about. The one I hadn't seen since I was 19. And now, She was advising a global private equity firm circling my company with a minority acquisition offer worth triple our last valuation. That wasn't coincidence. That was strategy. Julian read the disclosure over my shoulder. Friend or threat, he asked. I thought about Charlotte. Sharp, calculated, observant. She used to sit silently at family events, watching everyone like she was studying them for a test. Edward hated her, called her too ambitious, which in our family meant too uncontrollable. I don't think she's here to hurt me, I said slowly. I think she's here because she knows something. The firm requesting the meeting wasn't small. They were global hospitality investors. Aggressive but clean. Their interest, a 22% minority stake, no controlling rights, capital injection for international expansion. On paper, it was smart, strategic, well-timed. But timing like that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when someone believes you've stabilized enough to scale, or when someone believes you survived the storm and are now worth betting on. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. Neutral ground. Downtown Boston. Glass walls. Minimalist boardroom. When Charlotte walked in, she didn't look surprised to see me. She looked impressed. You grew up, she said with a small smile. So did you? I replied. No hostility, no fake warmth, just awareness. She didn't waste time. Your father always underestimated you, she said bluntly. That makes two of you, I replied. She chuckled. Fair. The private equity partners handled the numbers. Expansion projections, European acquisitions, luxury boutique scaling. I listened, calculated. Then I turned to Charlotte. Why now? The room quieted slightly. She met my eyes directly. Because you survived. That answer hit different. Not flattering. Accurate. Your father built empires through fear, she continued. You built yours through resilience. Investors trust resilience more. Julian glanced at me subtly. He knew what that meant. Markets weren't betting on revenge, they were betting on leadership. After the formal presentation ended, Charlotte asked for a private conversation. We stepped onto the terrace overlooking the city. Cold air, sharp skyline. You don't trust me, she said. I don't trust anyone automatically, I replied. She nodded approvingly. Good. There was no pretense between us. Just shared blood and shared survival. You know he tried to pull me into the same contingency structure he built against you? She asked quietly. That surprised me. Knew? He assumed I'd want a piece of whatever you built. And? I declined. She looked at the skyline. I left because I refused to play predator in my own family. That sentence stayed with me. You could have exposed him years ago, I said. She shook her head. No one would have believed me then. Power protects itself until it cracks. She turned to me. You cracked it. Not with pride. With acknowledgement. There's a difference. Back inside, negotiations resumed. I set terms clearly. No board interference. No operational control. Strict governance clauses. Ethical oversight. The firm agreed faster than expected. Because when you show you won't be bullied, bullies stop trying. But here's where it gets interesting. After contracts were drafted and reviewed, Charlotte added something unexpected, a clause protecting executive autonomy from forced psychiatric intervention via shareholder action. I stared at the language. Carefully worded. Ironclad. You added that? I asked. Yes. Why? Because I know what he tried. She didn't elaborate, she didn't need to. We signed 2 weeks later, largest minority capital infusion in company history. Global expansion unlocked. Brand elevation secured. Press coverage exploded again. This time, not scandal, not courtroom drama, growth, vision, leadership. And in every article there was one sentence repeated: Grain Ashford redefines legacy. Legacy, funny word. For years now, it felt like a rewrite. That night, Julian and I celebrated quietly. No champagne towers, no flashy events, just the two of us in our kitchen again. Cheap noodles, expensive wine, tradition. You know what's wild, he said. What? You never became him. That stopped me for a second. Because power has a way of whispering. Telling you control feels good, telling you leverage is addictive. Telling you dominance is security. But I didn't want dominance. I wanted sovereignty. Big difference. A week later, Charlotte requested one final meeting. Not about business, About family. We met at a quiet cafe. No press, no board members, just two women who survived the same dynasty differently. There's one more thing, she said. My pulse didn't spike this time. It steadied. I'm restructuring what's left of the extended Ashford trust, she continued. I blinked. What trust? The one Edward never told you about. Of course there was another layer. There's always another layer with men like him. It's smaller now, she said. Assets frozen during investigation, but there's still capital. And legally, your primary successor. I laughed softly. You're kidding. I'm not. Here's the irony, the man who tried to prove I was nothing without him structured his estate so I'd inherit what remained. Control, even in legacy. Except now, he didn't get to dictate terms. You can decline it, Charlotte said carefully. I know. And I meant it. Because inheritance isn't just money. It's memory, it's history, it's weight. I thought about it for days. About accepting capital built on intimidation. About rejecting it entirely. About rewriting it. Then I made a decision. Not emotional. Intentional. If I took it, it wouldn't continue his dynasty. It would dismantle it. I called Charlotte. I'll accept under one condition. Name it. We convert the remaining trust into a foundation. She didn't hesitate. For what? For legal defense grants to women facing coercive conservatorship or financial abuse. Silence. Then a slow exhale. I know. And that felt right. The Ashford Foundation launched quietly 6 months later. No flashy gala. No ego branding. Just resources, legal teams, advocacy, protection. Because power doesn't have to cage, it can shield. One evening, long after the headlines faded, I stood alone in my office. City lights steady. Reflection in the glass sharper than ever. I thought about Edward. About fear. About control. About how close I came to losing everything. And I realized something simple. Breaking a tyrant doesn't require becoming one. It requires refusing to kneel. But just when life finally felt steady. When expansion plans were underway. When the foundation began helping real women escape real traps. A call came from federal authorities. Short, direct. Unexpected. Edward Ashford wanted to see me. Not through lawyers. Not through intermediaries. In person. And this time, it wasn't about business. When the federal agent called, his voice was flat. Edward Ashford has requested a visit. Not demanded. Requested. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Power doesn't request. Power commands. Or at least it used to. I stared out the window of my office. Boston stretched beneath me like a living thing. For a moment, I was 12 again, sitting outside his study, waiting to be summoned. Except this time. He was the one asking. Is this strategic? Julian asked when I told him. No. I said honestly. It's closure. The federal correctional facility was nothing like the estate I grew up in. No marble floors. No oil paintings. No polished silence. Just fluorescent lights and concrete. The kind of place that strips titles down to inmate numbers. When they brought him into the visitor room, I almost didn't recognize him. The suit was gone, the tailored authority, the immaculate grooming. In its place, gray prison fabric. Shoulders slightly hunched, hair thinner. Eyes tired, not defeated, just aware. He sat across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence didn't feel hostile. It felt unfamiliar, like two people who no longer knew what roles to play. You look well, he said finally. I am, I replied. No sarcasm, just fact. He nodded once. I've been following the news. Of course he had. Men like him don't stop monitoring. Even when they lose the board. You turned the trust into a foundation? He said.
Yes.
For women fighting conservatorship abuse? Yes. A faint exhale escaped him. That was deliberate. Everything I do is deliberate. He almost smiled. There it was again. That flicker of reluctant respect. The kind he never gave me when I was under his roof. I didn't ask you here to argue, he said. Good. He folded his hands on the table. I asked you here because there's something you deserve to hear. I didn't interrupt. You were never weak. The words landed strangely. Too late. But real. I know, I said calmly. He gave a short nod. I mistook independence for rebellion. No. I corrected gently. You mistook control for love. That hit. I saw it. Because prison strips ego the way winter strips leaves. There's nowhere for pride to hide. I thought if you struggled enough, he admitted, you'd return. Return to what? To protection. Protection. Funny word for a cage. You starved us, I said quietly. You sabotaged him. He looked down at his hands. I was afraid. That one surprised me. Off what? Off being irrelevant. There it was. Not power, not money, not reputation. Relevance. Men who build empires often fear one thing more than collapse: replacement. You were never going to be replaced, I said. I didn't want your throne. He gave a dry laugh. Everyone wants the throne. No, I said softly. I wanted my own kingdom. That silence afterward, different from the others. He wasn't calculating. He wasn't maneuvering. He was processing. I underestimated you, he said finally. Yes, I agreed. Not bitter, not triumphant. Just accurate. And I overestimated myself. That admission. That was the closest thing to accountability I was ever going to get. We talked for another 20 minutes. Not about business. Not about legal appeals. About small things. My mother's move to Connecticut. Lucas's job in Chicago. The Foundation's early cases. He listened, really listened. For the first time in my life, no interrupting, no correcting, no instructing, just hearing. It felt strange. Like speaking to a man instead of a monument. When the guard signaled time was up, he hesitated. There's one more thing, he said. I waited. I never hated Julian. I raised an eyebrow. You ruined his career. I was threatened by him. That was almost laughable. Be an architect eating ramen. Yes. He met my eyes. He loved you without needing control. That sentence stayed in the air, because that's the part he could never replicate. Julian didn't need leverage to stand beside me. He just stood. I don't expect forgiveness, Edward said quietly. Good, I replied. He didn't flinch. But I wanted you to know, he continued, I see now what I built. And it wasn't strength. No, it wasn't. When I stood to leave, he didn't ask me to come back. Didn't ask me to write. Didn't ask me to fight for appeals. He just nodded once. You did what I couldn't, he said. What's that? You let go. And for the first time, I believed he meant it. Walking out of that facility felt different than walking out of the mansion months earlier. That night at the estate, I felt victorious. This time, I felt lighter, because anger is heavy. Even justified anger. And somewhere between indictments and foundations, I'd put it down, not for him, for me. When I got home, Julian was cooking again. Same old t-shirt, same off-key humming. He looked up. How was it? Quiet, I said. That good or bad? Necessary. He studied my face. You okay? I thought about the fluorescent lights. The gray uniform. The man who once filled rooms with command now speaking without armor. Yes, I said finally. I am. Life moved forward after that. Expansion into London finalized. Paris acquisition underway. Foundation funding secured for 5 years. Board governance stable. No hidden shells. No shadow contingency plans. Just transparent growth. For the first time, my empire wasn't built in reaction. It was built in intention. But here's the part nobody tells you about breaking generational power. You don't just end a dynasty. You redefine it. Because legacy isn't the buildings. It isn't the money. It isn't the last name etched into marble. It's what survives when control is gone. And what survived was me. 6 months later, I received one final letter. Not from the prison. From my mother. Short. Handwritten. He talks about you differently now. Not with anger. With recognition. I folded the letter carefully. Set it in my desk drawer. Not as a trophy. Not as validation. Just as evidence. That even the most rigid structures can crack. That night, standing on the balcony overlooking Boston, I realized something simple. He once told me I was nothing without him. But the truth. I became everything the moment I stopped trying to prove him wrong. And just when I thought the story had finally closed, the board approved something unexpected. A proposal I hadn't initiated. A motion that would permanently seal the Ashford name into corporate history. But not the way anyone expected. You know what's funny about power? It's loud when it's insecure. And quiet when it's real. 6 months after I walked out of that prison, After the trials, the indictments, the headlines, the foundations, after everything finally settled, the board called a special session, unscheduled, unprompted. I assumed it was expansion related. Maybe London, maybe Paris, maybe a new acquisition. I walked into the conference room expecting numbers. Instead, I found a plaque mock-up sitting in the center of the table, covered in black velvet, and 12 board members looking oddly sentimental. I don't trust sentimental boardrooms. They usually mean something big. Before we start, one of them said, clearing his throat, "We voted on something this morning." I raised an eyebrow. "You voted without me." A faint smile. "Unanimously." That got my attention. He removed the velvet cloth, and there it was. A redesigned building inscription for headquarters. Not Ashford Financial, not even Grain Hospitality Group, but something else. The Ashford Center for Ethical Leadership. I blinked. Silence stretched. Then he continued, "We believe your handling of the transition redefined what that name stands for." My chest didn't swell. It didn't tighten. It just steadied. Because here's the thing. For years, the name Ashford felt like a weapon. A threat. A legacy built on dominance. Now, they were trying to turn it into something different. "I didn't ask for this," I said carefully. "We know," another board member replied. "That's why it matters." The proposal was simple. Rename the former Ashford Financial Headquarters after restructuring. Convert the top 2 floors into an Executive Ethics Institute. Mandatory governance certification for senior leadership. Foundation collaboration programs. Permanent structural safeguards against coercive control in corporate frameworks. In other words, take the architecture of intimidation and replace it with accountability. I leaned back slowly. "You understand what that means," I said. "It ties my name permanently to the building." "Yes." "And to his history." "Yes." Silence. "Because that's the real question, right? Do you erase the past? Or do you reclaim it?" Julian once told me something while we were sanding hardwood floors in that first busted-up hotel. "You can't change what the wood used to be," he said. "But you can refinish it." Back then, we were covered in dust and hope. Now, I was staring at marble and memory. Refinishing doesn't erase damage, it transforms it. I stood up, walked to the window, looked down at the city that once felt impossible to conquer. 5 years ago, I was eating ramen and calculating how long before eviction notices hit. Now, I was deciding what legacy meant. "I'll approve it," I said finally. Relief flickered across the room. But under one condition. They waited. "The Institute's first program funds will go entirely to independent oversight initiatives for female founders facing coercive financial pressure." Unanimous nods. Done. Just like that. The Ashford name stopped belonging to a tyrant, and started belonging to a reform. The unveiling happened quietly. No over-the-top gala, no champagne waterfall. Just press, board members, foundation partners. And my mother. She stood slightly behind me as the curtain dropped from the new building inscription. The cameras flashed. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at the letters. ASHFRD. For the first time in my life, it didn't feel heavy. It felt neutral. Earned, rewritten. After the ceremony, my mother squeezed my hand. "He would have hated this?" she said softly. "I know." She smiled faintly. "But he would have understood it too. Maybe. Maybe not. But understanding wasn't my responsibility anymore. Integrity was." Later that night, Julian and I stood on the rooftop of the newly renamed center. Wind cutting across the skyline. City lights stretching endless and electric. "You realize what you did?" he asked. "What?" "You didn't just take his company." I looked at him. "You redesigned the meaning of power." That hit deeper than any headline ever did. Because that's the part nobody talks about. Beating someone in business, that's tactical. Redefining the structure they used to dominate, that's legacy. I thought back to the dinner table. The fake psychiatric reports. The 28 million loan. The offshore transfers. The prison visit. Every moment could have turned me bitter. Hard, ruthless. But here's the truth: power that's built on revenge rots fast. Power built on boundaries lasts. A year later, Grain Hospitality opened its first international flagship in London, then Paris, then Tokyo. The foundation funded its 50th legal defense case. The Ethics Institute became required certification for major corporate partners. And quietly, steadily, the Ashford narrative shifted. Not erased, not forgotten, reframed. One evening, long after the noise faded, I sat alone in my office, the pearl earrings from my grandmother resting against my collarbone. City humming below. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside were three things: the forged psychiatric report, the letter from Dr. Vance, and the handwritten apology from my mother. I didn't keep them out of pain. I kept them as proof that gaslighting fails under light. Proof that leverage can backfire. Proof that you can be targeted, sabotaged, threatened, and still build something bigger than fear. People still ask me sometimes, do you regret it? Regret what? Exposing him. Taking control. Refusing to sign those papers. No. Because the night he told me to sign or be locked away, he assumed I was still the girl who needed his permission to exist. He was wrong. And that's the real twist. I never needed to destroy him. I just needed to stop kneeling. The last time I visited the building late at night, the lobby was empty, quiet, polished floors reflecting the new inscription. I stood there alone, no cameras, no board, no audience, just me, and the name. For a moment, I imagined that younger version of myself walking in. Scared, uncertain, believing power lived in that top floor office. I wish I could tell her something simple. Power isn't inherited, it's chosen, and sometimes, the strongest move you'll ever make is refusing to sign. And that's the story. Not about revenge, not about money, not even about family, it's about sovereignty. About rewriting legacy instead of running from it. About turning a threat into a foundation. He said I was nothing without him. Turns out, I was unstoppable the moment I decided I didn't need him at all.